Depending on the poll, St. Louis sometimes holds the title of most dangerous city in the nation. We sat down with a group of community advocates, political leaders, as well as members of the law enforcement community to have a frank discussion about crime in the St. Louis area.
When you Google St. Louis, crime stats still pop up pretty high up there.
Right. St. Louis has two problems in that respect. Like all big cities, we have a crime problem, and we have to address that problem. We also have a crime statistic problem, and that's a little bit different. Our crime statistic problem has to do with the fact that we are very, very tightly drawn central city, 76 square miles, in a metropolitan area of 2 million. And the city residents comprise only about 11% of the metropolitan area population. So to become a crime victim in the city of St. Louis, all you have to do is become a victim in the city. That's the numerator of the crime rate, the top part of the fraction. The bottom part is the city population. The city population is relatively small, certainly compared to the potential pool of victims from all around the region. That gives us a crime rate that is artificially higher than it would be in other cities, even cities much like ours, like Memphis. Memphis comprises a little over half of its metropolitan area. So we are, in some sense, disadvantaged by that geographic issue, and that's one area in which a city-county quote-unquote merger, at least with respect to crime statistics, could help a lot with our crime statistics problem. We do also have a genuine crime problem. I think it's important not to confuse the two. It's the crime statistics problem, unfortunately, that drives some of the negative perceptions, and some of those perceptions, I think, are baseless.
Okay, let's talk about crime and punishment a little bit more, and maybe some of the disparities we might see in sentencing. I want to introduce the table. Norm White, professor, St. Louis University, criminology and criminal justice. Welcome back to the show. Susan McGraw, law professor at St. Louis University School of Law. And Thomas Harvey, executive director, Arch City Defenders. So we just heard from the judge a little bit about looking kind of behind the curtain of how things go. Do the punishments fit the crime? Are the punishments doing any good?
I think there's a place for punishment, but I think there's also a real opportunity to affect a lasting change in a lot of the people who move through the criminal justice system. I think punishment's part of it, but I think that we need to start thinking about what else we can do. What else we can do to rehabilitate, how we can get people jobs, how we can keep them out of the system in the first place.
Arch City Defenders, you take on a lot of work for people who wouldn't have attorneys otherwise.
That's right. And what we see consistently is people who are punished disproportionately to their crime. They are low-level offenders who are punished by not being represented sometimes, by being assessed fines they can't afford, by the incarceration because they are unable to obtain an attorney, which leads to potentially losing their housing, losing a job if they had one, losing touch with their family while they're in there. There are serious consequences to a lot of these low-level crimes that sometimes are prosecuted as a result of some of the hotspot policing we talked about earlier on the show.
But one of the things that I find when I do go to neighborhood meetings, you're absolutely right. They're concerned about violence, but they're also concerned about quality of life issues. I'm a firm believer in the broken windows theory, that neighborhoods that show signs of deterioration, the criminal element feels comfortable to operate in those. So there is value in those low-level arrests, too, if you're trying to change what's been going on systemically in neighborhoods over time. And we need generational solutions. This isn't a 1 or 2 year solution. We need to be getting to the kids in first and second and third grade and giving them hope, giving them direction. And then finally, what I would say is we need outcomes that keep people safe. Could be incarceration, could be jobs, could be other things, but we need outcomes that keep people safe. And we, as a society, aren't very good at that right now.
Is that something that can the police departments get to kids at first and second and third grade level?
Well, we can, and we've been doing that for years. We've tried that through the DARE program. We tried to do the right thing. But I'll tell you this, the police department, the courts, they can't do it by themselves. If we don't have community engagement regarding this, then we're not going to ever be able to achieve what we want to achieve. We saw that with the Lafayette Park area, and we see that all over the place. When our communities become engaged with the police department, and when the police department is proactive in engaging those communities, we can make that positive difference, but that is the key.
And I agree
with that, and I think one of the most frustrating things is that with the new local control we have in the city, one of the reasons I supported local control and was so excited about local control is that it would give us an opportunity to take a holistic approach to fighting crime. The police department can't do it by themselves, but we have an opportunity now to coordinate efforts between the police department, the Parks and Recreation Department, St. Louis Public Schools, the Health Department, and the Building Division to board up some of these buildings. I completely agree about the broken window theory too. You look at an area like College Hill and you see why there is so much violence and crime over there, because it looks like an abandoned part of town. And so we have an opportunity now. I don't think the mayor has used that opportunity and sees that opportunity. And it may take the Board of Aldermen and the Public Safety Committee to push on that to make sure that happens, but that's the only way we're ultimately going to solve it.
Outcomes that keep, I'm sorry, Chief.
Well, I was going to say, I think I could say this now since I'm in a different role. As great as police departments are and police officers are, they can't be tasked with the role of dealing with poverty, dealing with unemployment, dealing with deteriorating neighborhoods. I think the police departments try to play their part in that role, but if a 3-year-old has a lack of education and is impoverished and their family doesn't have employment, that's not necessarily the role of the criminal justice system. And so we have to find another way to deal with those social issues in those neighborhoods before they come to the police officer, before they have to deal with them. And so I think the police department, they do a great job, but I don't know whether or not that is their specialty, right?
I think that, I would disagree in one way to say that it should be part of the criminal justice system. Maybe not be part of law enforcement, but we're part of the criminal justice system as well. And Sue and I's organizations connect people to social services as well. So it is part of trying to solve the underlying problems that the criminal justice system does play a part in that.
Oh, yeah.
A very important part, because the social service organizations aren't there in the courts. So it takes lawyers like Professor McGraw and other people in the community to make some of those connections, because the poor people we're talking about, they don't have the benefit of private treatment programs like some of the middle class and wealthier people do. They need to be connected to these social service organizations to address mental health problems, substance abuse problems, things that are really driving some of the crimes that we're talking about.
The police have an important role to play in averting crime, preventing crime. And by preventing crime, then you don't have kids racking up huge arrest records, cementing criminal identities, and generating the kind of stigma and reduction in opportunity that is so tragic in this community and other communities. We don't want police simply making arrests. We want police to avert crime.
But I would push back on that a little bit, because again, if we're talking about violent crime, and especially homicides.
I am talking about violent crime.
Well, in violent crimes, if you're living in a city where most murderers get away with murder, it is not a comfortable place to live in. If you live in College Hill neighborhood and you had a rash of violence last year, and all of those murderers are still on the street, then that is not a place that you feel comfortable in. And so when it comes to violent crimes, convictions of actual murderers is important.
Of course.
It is absolutely important, but it's actually really unfair to put that at the step of law enforcement or even the criminal justice system. In some respects, the criminal justice system is kind of like the crucible of problems. Society's problems come out and are displayed for all to see in the courtrooms and in front of the police officers. But in reality, what precipitated that murder, none of the people at this table had anything to do with. And so the issues really do come to, if we really want to take on crime, we have to do something well before it's a law enforcement issue. We have to do something in the schools. We have to do something to support families. We have to do something to support poverty. And to lay that at the doorstep of law enforcement is really unfair.
But I think what you're talking about is crime prevention, which I completely agree with. But after a crime occurs, it is up to the judicial system, it is up to the police department, it is up to the whole system to see that justice is done.
Except they
and when
can't-
justice is not done, that sends a very negative, damaging message to the community.
Alderman, the number one reason, across the board, and I can name you 3 murders in the last month where no one was held accountable, and it's because the people who know about it, saw about it, won't do anything about it.
And do you understand why?
We do understand why, but we need community leaders to encourage people to come forward. We need to work with the community so that they begin despite the decades of history and the long trauma, we have to begin to trust that system and come forward. The reason the homicides in the city, and I agree with you, it's tragic. I had a brother killed. You know what? In the situation, those families deserve better. But the people who know about it and saw about it are really the ones who can do something about it.